Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 33rd audio file in the audiocast series known as the Q News Patriot. I am the Q News Patriot. My name is SGAnon. It is so good to be with you. So exciting. There is so much going on. There's so much happening in the information space. There's so much happening in the physical military operational space. We're seeing the narrative prep and the rhetoric continue in escalation. We are seeing real evidence being dropped related to the COVID bioweapons, the COVID kill shots, and the vaccine agenda, which all of us, of course, knew about and have known about for quite a while now, or some of us maybe for just a little while as we've been coming around here more recently. This is just a very exciting time to be alive, to be witnessing the fall of the control matrix, to be witnessing the implosion of everything that they ever wanted right before their eyes. So tonight's file, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about France. We're going to talk about Sleepy Joe. We're going to talk about the symbolism designed behind the sort of pinnacle of the Luciferian satanic government of the Catholic Church. We're going to talk a little bit about United States Marine Corps operations ongoing currently. We're going to talk about the symbolism behind taking control of the different areas and levers of society. And so if you are new to the Q News Patriot, if you're new to me, very glad to have you aboard. This is quite an exciting afternoon, quite an exciting time to be able to come to all of you. I appreciate and thank all of you for your patience with regarding to my little one. We had quite a number of severe storms and just some severe weather yesterday in this particular area, and sometimes thunder wakes them up, and they do really good to be in their room for a while by themselves at this delicate age, about 5.5, and sometimes not so much. And last evening was not so much, but we got it all sorted out. Everything was relatively easy to smooth over. We had a little bit of water and went back to bed, and repeated the process at least one more time, and that was that. So I thank you very much for your patience as it pertains to that. I do this because this is a labor of love for me. This is a pursuit of passion. It is heavy on my heart and sort of burning brightly within my soul to bring to you all the most up-to-date, accurate to the greatest extent of my ability, information to help guide you through what is a very confusing, necessarily confusing portion of human history, and clarity, I believe, will be found in the hindsight. It's sort of ironic that most of you out there, began the awakening process in late 2019 and all through the year of 2020. And it will be that year that will forever go down in history as the year that humanity was, or began to find their sight lines again, began to open their eyes, wake up, become aware to the realities of our earth, the realities of the world, the realities of the nature of our world, free energy, things of this ilk. So in a way, we all got 2020 vision, if you will. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right down to it. The war in Europe with Russia and the Ukraine is set to intensify dramatically in a short period of time. We now have confirmed information that a multinational force involving NATO troops fighting in the dishonorable fashion of unmarked mercenary status or unmarked mercenary identification is now going on. NATO is not going to allow the New World Order to fall without deploying all of the assets that they have left at their disposal. A great portion of this operation, a great portion of this journey that we've been on has been to isolate and flip different areas in militaries, military intelligence, military commands around the world to help align them, bring them into the alliance fold in secret. That way, when they are called upon at the pivotal time in history, which I believe is this time, that we have some amount of sway and some amount of being able to sort of control the pendulum and keep it from coming around in a way that we can't control. But that is not to say that we have total control over over those situations at this time. This is a work in progress. This is a very active situation. NATO depends on the NWO, the United Nations. It's a very tenuous situation over there. Russia is aware of this. Putin and Russian military intelligence are very well aware and have been tracking the flow of NATO equipment, assets, NATO-backed troops, finance, things of that nature, monies in and out of that area of the world for quite a while now, certainly since before the special military operation even began. And they will respond, I believe, with the measures necessary to ensure Russia and the White Hats win this conflict. I reported in the last file that it's my opinion, it's my belief based on the information that I've found and the research that I've done, and some of what has been told to me, that Finland and Poland will soon be joining this great battle. It is now also my belief, and I'm here to tell you after a brief discussion with my mentor, that France will leave NATO and that France has now been flipped to the White Hat side. France will come out against the New World Order power structure and the national governments and military entities and organizations that sort of adhere to that United Nations globalist New World Order agenda. The people of France are on fire for getting out of NATO. They are on fire for not being a part of another European war. It's my opinion that most of Europe will be involved either economically, by proxy, or directly in this conflict involving the destruction of these ancestral Khazarian individuals before this is over. This is going to require we the people to be involved actively before it's all said and done. We have power structures within our own countries that are working against us. We have power structures within our own countries that are working for us. And we have some gray areas that still remain and that are being sort of played and planned, planned for and incorporated into the strategy at a day-to-day, sometimes hour by hour interval. Pardon me. So we can expect, in my opinion, the Russian war to expand. I believe that Belarus, Russia, and Turkey will, Belarus, Russia, and Hungary, as well as possibly Turkey, will be involved in the occupation of most of central and eastern Ukraine, and that we will see a multinational force, likely Polish, German, British, involved in the sort of emergency intervention actions, which will go public before the war is over in the western portions of the country. Sort of pivoting off of that, we got an enormous calm from the death of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. That particular announcement was far more significant than I think anybody has really touched on up to this point. Emeritus Benedict was the Luciferian controller of the Catholic Church. He was the point person, the puppeteer, the puppet master for the current Pope, Pope Francis. Benedict XVI, one of the most evil, sick, twisted human beings ever to exist, involved in the highest levels of this gruesome brutality known as the dark occult, Luciferian Baal worship, the Marduk sacrifice, the Moloch sacrifice arm of this cabal. The fall of Benedict XVI happening on New Year's Eve was by no means an accident. New Year's Eve is traditionally celebrated by the Babylonians, those who follow the Babylonian calendar, as a celebration of a feast called Akitu. Akitu is a New Year's celebration from ancient Babylon that involved a 12-day period. And along in that 12-day period, the king of Babylon would be forced to swear fealty and allegiance to this Luciferian cabal, the dark occult religion, the god Bel or Baal, once again, through the participation in a human sacrificial ceremony. It was to appease the gods, it was to appease their high god, and it was to secure their future for the next year. In my estimation, what we saw happen on 12/31 was the White Hat Alliance confirming to us, in the same way that they confirmed to us with the announcement of the death of QE2, that we have taken control at the top of another one of the three primary levers of power and control in the world. We took control on September 8th, 2022, of the world financial system, the world banking system. It is my estimation that the calm with QE2's death was sort of like a QFS will be ready to roll whenever the buttons are pushed, whenever we arrive at that point for the flip. The death of Emeritus Benedict, a prolific consumer of tortured children's blood, a prolific murderer, and a torture artist. On 12/31, one of the Babylonian Moloch holy days, tells me that we have now taken control of a second major arm of power and influence in the world, and that arm is spirituality. The control and the misdirection that has been applied and incorporated into our day-to-day religious worship, that has been sort of brought from the top down through rituals that are modeled incompletely off of the Holy Book, and in some cases have extrapolated certain ritualistic techniques from pagan idolatrous worship over the last 5,000 to 7,000 years. A great deal of that hails from this very Babylonian era that we're discussing. And this was a significant event. The loss of the Vatican arm, the loss of that particular lever of power and influence and control, means that the only thing left outside of, that the only remaining power structure that we need to dethrone is the military industrial complex, the ability of the deep state and the Five Eyes to wage war, the ability of the deep state to use power and control in the form of manipulation of economics, in the form of manipulation of countries, in the form of them having possession of very serious weaponry capabilities. That is the remaining vassal state, the vassal arm, if you will, of this power structure that must come down. And we are now more than 70% of the way there on the whole. This is a very exciting time. 2023 has been cited by various mystics throughout the ages as a year of calamity for the earth, a year of rebirth, but a year of very intense difficulty for mankind. I think that we can expect exactly that. Just recently, we saw former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev post a thread on Twitter that was absolutely wild and gives me serious pause, as I believe that a great deal of what the Russian president tweeted is actually a heads up rather than a speculatory tweet presented in the lens that it is. I do not believe that everything contained within his thread was an omen, and I do not believe that everything contained in that thread will come true, but I do believe that more than 50% of it will. Let's review that really quickly here. Posted December the 26th, 2022. Oil prices will rise to $150 a barrel, and gas prices will top $5 per 1 cubic meter. The UK will rejoin the EU. The EU will collapse after the UK's return. The euro will drop out of use as the former EU currency. Poland and Hungary will occupy western regions of the formerly existing Ukraine. The Fourth Reich will come to be, encompassing the territory of Germany and its satellites, such as Poland, the Baltic states, Czechia, Slovakia, the Kiev Republic, and other outcasts. War will break out between France and the Fourth Reich. Europe will be divided, Poland repartitioned in the process. Northern Ireland will separate from the UK and join the Republic of Ireland. Civil war will break out in the US, California and Texas becoming independent states as a result. Texas and Mexico will form an allied state. Elon Musk will win the presidential election in a number of states, which, after the new civil wars end, will have been given to the GOP. All the largest stock markets and financial activity will leave the US and Europe and move to Asia. The Bretton Woods system of monetary management will collapse, leading to the IMF and World Bank crash. Euro and dollar will stop circulating as the global reserve currencies. Digital fiat currencies will be actively used instead. Season's greetings to you all Anglo-Saxon friends and happily oinking piglets. So as I stated, I do not believe that every single one of those will come to pass, but I do believe that many of them will. We are in for a very world-changing year. We are in for a year of ups and downs, and we are in for the sort of death thrashes, if you will, of this NWO deep state power complex, this power structure. There are tribunals set for late summer, early fall of 2023, and will likely continue into 2024. We have an enormous number of things going on to be thankful for, but we also have an enormous number of signs being given to us to be shrewd, to be intelligent, to act with deliberateness, and where possible, to have a little bit of a sense of urgency as well. Moving right along to our next particular discussion, the United States Marine Corps, based on my research, things that I'm finding and things that I'm seeing in various areas on the internet, it appears that the United States Marine Corps is running domestic operations against enemy combatants and apprehending prisoners of war, individuals involved primarily in the Hollywood and West Coast elite, who can be identified as espionage assets. Remember, a great deal of the celebrities out there, those individuals that we're taught to trust and worship and admire and model and strive to be, are captured operations right from the very beginning. Some of them much more deeply involved and entrenched than the others. A number of Hollywood has already been taken out due to crimes against humanity and crimes against children. Tom Hanks being one. There are a couple of other very interesting examples. But it's my belief that a number of them, not involved in that level severity of crimes, are still involved in war crimes. They're still acting as espionage points of contact. They're providing aid and comfort to the enemy. They're providing actionable intelligence about, white hat, black hat operations to the enemy. And these individuals are combatants of war. They are no longer civilians to be sort of toyed with. When you are actively thwarting or attempting to thwart a military operation, you have made yourself a battlefield combatant. And so it's my understanding that the United States Marine Corps is doing what the Marine Corps does very well, apprehending fugitives from international justice, apprehending espionage combatants and taking prisoners of war, and extracting from that as much actionable intelligence and information as possible. Just today we saw on flight radar one of the doomsday birds up over the southeast United States. We've seen a whole host of fascinating call signs on U.S. military aircraft up over both the continental United States and the European continent over the last 7 to 10 days. We've seen Australian birds over North Africa, over the Middle East, and over Central Europe just in the last 7 to 10 days. These operations are absolutely proceeding. They are proceeding at a very rapid pace. Like I said, we're this year very much it seems to be moving us towards the bottleneck, the choke point, if you will, where all of this has to go to a much more public level. Speaking of things being much more public, we've recently seen a back and forth with the situation in Brazil and in South America, and I do have a little bit of information from my mentor's research that I want to point out, regarding South America. Recently, there was essentially a flight blackout, a flight grounding that was instituted, a temporary change in flight rules over the southeast, the state of Florida and the southeast coast of the United States. Brazilian President Bolsonaro was actually in Florida at the time, as well as Commander-in-Chief President Donald J. Trump. It is my understanding, it's my mentor's understanding as well, that deep state Mossad assets were attempting to infiltrate the state of Florida, meet up with deep sleeper espionage cells within Florida, and assassinate President Bolsonaro. An attempt was also going to be made against the Commander-in-Chief, President Donald J. Trump. The military did what the military does best. They insulated our leaders, our lawful and rightful leaders. It's my understanding that the counter operations to that particular scenario and contingency plan are underway. I don't have any more information about that at this time, but it certainly would seem very appropriate given the level of Mossad sleeper network, espionage network involvement, or I should say the level of activation seen in that area over the last 6 to 8 months around the world. Speaking of Mossad and deep sleepers and things of this nature, it is also my belief at this point in time, based on my research, that if we see a second pandemic, and we may very well, or an attempt at a new pandemic, it will come from the South American continent. We're seeing a lot of activity pertaining to movement of military assets, both good and bad, into South America, and we're seeing a lot of activity sort of flickering on flight radar. You can track these flights, but you have to be very, very quick on the radar to do so. Back and forth from Argentina and what appears to be bases on the Antarctic shelf. This is a worldwide game back and forth for control of the Earth. This is a worldwide leverage of power and control from both sides, and all sides are deploying the resources that they have at their disposal while trying to retain as much strength, as much sort of sprinting power for that very last run to the finish line. It is very possible that between that particular line of research that I'm seeing, as well as what I was told by my mentor, it's very possible that Bolsonaro was targeted for elimination in the same way that some of the African heads of state were targeted immediately prior to the release of COVID-19. This is the battle for the earth. This is the war for the destiny of mankind. And we cannot forget that we are playing for keeps. And we do have a very capable remaining 1/3 of this apparatus that we need to be wary of. It's the most well-equipped, it's the most well-armed, it's the most capable. But ironically, it is likely the least of the three. It's the least effective at generating original strategies and plan designs. And so in that way, we sort of have that working for us. Sleepy recently went to St. Croix. Almost immediately after that, we saw JP Morgan and the U.S. Virgin Islands essentially diverge from this path that they were on, which was directly related to JP Morgan's financing of Jeffrey Epstein's activities and the activities, the nefariousness that went on at Epstein Island. It's my understanding that there was a meeting that occurred in St. Croix that our actor Sleepy needed to be at. It's my understanding that that meeting involved much more than just the JP Morgan prosecutor being essentially dismissed or told to back off, but also involved payoffs for individuals in the U.S. Virgin Islands as well, hush money and a large amount of dark money being transferred. This is sort of how they work. We have to allow them to commit certain crimes so that we can identify who their allies and agents are at various levels of society all around the world. We know that in shipping ports and shipping lanes, for example, we found a number of pedophiles, mercenaries, things of that nature. We obviously have found many and have identified many traitors in governments all around the world and in the militaries around the world. And we've been working slowly but surely to identify civilian traitors, civilian Kabbalist assets who are more than just middle people, who are more than just individuals sort of taking orders. Individuals that have some amount of stopping power are expected morally to exercise that amount of stopping power. And when they do not, they become sort of complicit in a much grander international crime or international crimes that will come back to haunt them. That's part of what was going on in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I think we can expect to see more in the financial space as it pertains to Bank of America and other large banks, large corporate banks, as a result of that meeting. There's an enormous amount of back and forth going on, all sides doing their very best to sort of maintain what little balance, what little control that they have left. As the White Hats continually gain ground, as we expand our control and our reach of the board, we are being pushed back on in all conceivable ways. We are being squeezed in all conceivable ways. And those desperation moves are absolutely coming. But those desperation moves are always reserved for the point of no return, the point of true desperation, if you will. And so I think that we can expect to see things get very exciting in the next few months as a result of all of that. Now, something very interesting I think is worth highlighting to each of you, and then we will close off the file with a little bit of optimism, a little bit of a good discussion about where we go from here. We know from a particular Q drop, as a matter of fact, it's drop 34, that John Podesta, or Mr. Podesta, excuse me, will be one of the very first arrests that will confirm the direction for military intervention. That's going to confirm taking our country back. We're going to read this drop to you. My fellow Americans, over the course of the next several days, you will undoubtedly realize that we are taking back our great country, the land of the free, from the evil tyrants that wish to do us harm and destroy the last remaining refuge of shining light. On POTUS's order, we have initiated certain fail-safes that shall safeguard the public from the primary fallout, which is slated to occur 11.3 upon the arrest announcement of Mr. Podesta, actionable 11.4. Confirmation to the public of what is occurring will then be revealed and will not be openly accepted. Public riots are being organized in serious numbers in an effort to prevent the arrest and capture of more senior public officials. On POTUS's order, a state of temporary military control will be actioned and special ops carried out. False leaks have been made to retain several within the confines of the United States to prevent extradition and special operator necessity. Rest assured, the safety and well-being of every man, woman, and child of this country is being exhausted in full. However, the atmosphere within the country will unfortunately be divided, as so many have fallen for the corrupt and evil narrative that has been broadcast. We will be initiating the Emergency Broadcast System, EMS, during this time in an effort to provide a direct message, avoiding the fake news, to all citizens. Organizations and/or people that wish to do us harm during this time will be met with swift fury. Certain laws have been pre-lifted to provide our great military the necessary authority to handle and conduct these operations at home and abroad. Now, that is a very powerful drop. It's actually one of the iconic Q drops, and a drop that many veteran Anons and new Anons sort of salivate over. It would be a very exciting moment to witness the taking back of our country in a forceful, very assured, very confident way. But we know that the arrest announcement of Mr. Podesta will begin the primary fallout. So isn't it interesting then that John Podesta, former chief of staff to the Obama White House, was named as the Biden administration advisor, special advisor, czar, if you will, for the implementation of clean energy, meaning this individual, formerly involved with the Podesta Group, will be heading the energy infrastructure, or excuse me, will be working directly, I should say, will be working directly with the head of the energy infrastructure of the United States government, which of course is the Department of Energy. Now, the U.S. Department of Energy is a fascinating organization. I'm not so sure that many of you out there have done very much research on it. I certainly have not. I actually began researching it just a few days ago. But when you go to the U.S. Department of Energy, you find some very fascinating rabbit holes that you can get lost in for a number of hours. The U.S. Department of Energy, you go to the homepage and go to offices of this department, program offices. One of the offices that comes up, actually, let me just read some of these to you. The Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, Energy Focus, the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, the Office of Legacy Management, the Office of Nuclear Energy, the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, the Office of Artificial Intelligence and Technology, the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains, Grid Deployment, and more. Now, staff offices. Office of the Chief Information Officer, Office of the Inspector General, Office of the General Counsel, so these are all normal. Office of NEPA Policy and Compliance, Office of International Affairs, Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs, and here's where things start to get very interesting. Office of Public Affairs, Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilizations, Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence. What? This is an energy agency. Well, let's click this. The U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence is responsible for all intelligences and counterintelligence activities throughout the Department of Energy complex, including nearly 30 intelligence and counterintelligence offices nationwide. The office protects vital national security information and technologies representing intellectual property of incalculable value. Probably hiding Tesla tech. Our distinctive contribution to national security is the ability to leverage the Energy Department's unmatched scientific and technological expertise in support of policymakers as well as national security missions in defense, homeland security, cybersecurity, intelligence, and energy security. The U.S. Department of Energy is a member of the U.S. intelligence community. That's on their website. That's not my own emphasis. That's directly from their webpage. Now, that is absolutely fascinating. So what else do they have access to? Well, come to find out, the U.S. Department of the Energy is actually one of the civilian arms of this deep state Kabbalist military arm. This is a primary bureaucratic interceding point between the military industrial complex and the civilian sector military industrial complex. And yes, they both exist, and they are two different things. The U.S. Department of Energy is the same department that built the atom bomb. The U.S. Department of Energy was put together to oversee all of the technology, all of the deep intelligence capabilities, especially as it pertained to energy around the world, the energy of this earth, the energy of our realm that we have. This department was assembled to provide the cabal a very quick turning point, or a very quick choke point, if you will, for total control over this sector of society. Listed under their labs and technology centers, the Los Alamos National Laboratory, the Idaho National Laboratory, the New Brunswick Laboratory, the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education, the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory, the Radiological and Environmental Sciences Lab, the Thomas Jefferson National Accelerator Facility, the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. The types of research that this office oversees, the types of technology that this office is directly, or that this department is directly responsible for having hidden and then weaponized against the peoples of the world, is sort of unspeakable. This particular department of the U.S. government has essentially total control over the civilian apparatus of government at all levels, because they have total control over a nation's energy. Nothing happens without energy. Nothing happens without the control of that energy in this Kabbalist matrix. This department is very, very important to this movie as we go forward. So curiously enough, contained within their Office of Nuclear Energy is something called the National Nuclear Security Administration. The National Nuclear Security Administration, a department of the U.S., or excuse me, a subsidiary of the U.S. Department of Energy, is responsible for maintaining the nation's nuclear stockpile, the nation's ability to harness, research, and further develop nuclear and atomic energy. Recently, they announced the extension of terms for the Los Alamos National Laboratory and the operating contract. Other recent news is that this particular agency has been involved in essentially nuke sniffing on the civilian side of things at none other than football games in large urban areas where sporting events are going off, specifically football games recently. Now that's very interesting, because we know that a book and a movie referenced by Q called The Sum of All Fears involves a nuclear scare event, contains a nuclear scare event, which involves professional football. I believe it's football stadiums in the actual movie. John Podesta is inextricably linked to this agency and the directionality of the implementation of this agency's agenda. John Podesta is also one of the senior members of this deep state cabal, a transnational criminal wanted in many countries and the United States. Just a horrible, horrible human being. This individual, having such proximity to the U.S. Department of Energy, gives me quite a bit of pause, but it gives me quite a bit of comfort as well, because it seems to confirm to me the involvement of the plan at the deep level. It has always been the plan of the deep state to reset and revamp human society. It has always been the plan of the deep state to weaponize the very realities of our world against us, to so effectively control our knowledge of and our awareness of how our world is and how our world works. And that plan is coming apart. That plan is now no longer effective, is no longer functional, certainly is no longer accepted by a great majority of the masses, even if they're not willing to accept the conspiratorial agenda behind that. We are living in an incredible time. We are living in a time where the events of the greatest political thrillers and the greatest sort of spy novels, espionage works, if you will, are coming to fruition. We're getting to see some of the stories that we've read in books play out on the world stage for us to see, because those stories were, of course, always based in reality to begin with. We just never knew that. Movies like Taken, those are documentaries. Those aren't action thrillers. They're not works of fiction. Marvel tech, things in the Disney Marvel movies, much of that is real. Not all, but a great deal of it is real. This is the most exciting time in human history. You have a front row seat to the process of collapse for this deep state cabal. For the first time, we have the initiative on this board, on this back and forth as we vie for power and control of the world. We have the initiative. They are responding to our moves. They are responding to the things that we are doing. They are responding to the actions that we are and have and will continue to take. We are not reactive to them anymore. We are in control in that fashion. And as we continue to allow them to grind their system to powder, making disastrous counter moves that cannot be recovered from or reclaimed, they are exposing themselves to the world. They are breaking the MK Ultra mind control spell that has ensnared so many of us, so many of our loved ones, our sleepers, our friends and family, our colleagues, our bosses, our subordinates. They're starting to turn around. And at the same time that all of this is occurring, they're losing real power. They're losing real control. They are losing a very important portion of what has allowed them to maintain the illusion. And they will never get it back. You are living the most exciting time to be alive. So with that, everyone, this is SGAnon. I really very much appreciate your time this evening. I very much appreciate you sticking with it all the way, all of this way. We are into January of 2023 now. What a ride this has been. What an incredible journey. What a hard-fought road that we have walked, and we will continue to walk. And when we taste the victory, it will be sweeter than all of the honey in the world. And so with that, everyone, find rest this evening in peace. Enjoy time with your families. Spend time with your kids. Enjoy them. Enjoy the love that exists, that binds us all. Enjoy the love that sustains us all. It is that very love and our sensitivity to that love that has allowed for us to come this far this quickly. We as humankind have begun a very rapid wake-up process just over the last 2 to 2.5 years. One could maybe extrapolate out to as much as over the last 5 years. We are writing an enormous amount of programming, decades worth of programming in a very, very short amount of time. And even though it does take a little bit longer than what we would like for it to take in the here and now, it is taking a little bit longer as our days get, as our lives get more complicated and a little bit more pinched and a little bit more constrained. But we are making leaps and bounds that we cannot deny ourselves. We are making progress in ways that we simply must acknowledge. It cannot go unacknowledged. It is very significant. And that progress will continue to accelerate in a way that is very exciting for those battle-hardened Anons, those very deeply awake patriots who have been awake for a long time. This ride is about to be all worth it for you. A number of you out there will become the most popular individual in your familial and social circles very soon, as great many of the truths that you have tried to put out to those spheres and circles of influence are corroborated by the very individuals, or some of the very individuals that your circles of influence trust more than you. So hold tight. Your vindication is nigh. Love wins this war, everyone. And we are well underway. Buckle down, stay strong, head on a swivel, and I will be with you again soon. This is SGAnon. Thanks. Bye-bye.